"You're just a child, Harper," Aunt Nadine said, stepping over the threshold like she already owned the place. "This house needs real adults. It's time you let go." 3 days after our father's funeral, the doorbell rang at 8 a.m., as if grief wasn't already heavy enough. I opened it, still wearing my faded black sweater, hair unwashed, eyes sleepless, and saw the last people I ever expected to show up. Uncle Dale and Aunt Nadine, my father's older brother and his perfectly plastic wife, with folders in their hands and something worse behind their eyes. Beside them stood Belle, their 25-year-old daughter, scrolling her phone like she was bored at a DMV. I gripped the doorknob. "Can I help you?" Aunt Nadine stepped inside without waiting. "We need to talk about the house and the future of the boys." "The house?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I meant. "This is our home. Dad left it to us." Uncle Dale gave a slow, patronizing smile. "Harper, you're too young to understand legal complexities. There's no will. And with 3 younger boys, no income, and no legal standing, well, let's just say you're not in a position to make decisions." "I saw him put it in the safe," I snapped. "He told me." "Nothing was filed," Belle cut in, tapping her tablet. "No record of probate, no submitted documentation. Trust me, we checked." I could hear the boys upstairs. Eli, 15, quiet and watchful. Noah, 13, always laughing. And Caleb, 11, still tender, still soft from the years Angela, our stepmother, had loved him like her own. "We're not going anywhere," I said. My voice cracked, but my spine didn't. "They're my brothers. I'm raising them." Dale crossed his arms. You don't have a job. You dropped out of school. You have no assets. What you have is 3 dependents and no plan. You're not fit." "They're not going with you." 3 days, Aunt Nadine said, ignoring me. "You have 3 days to pack." That night, I sat in the living room on the hardwood floor that Dad had refinished himself one summer. The framed photo of the 4 of us rested beside me. The boys all laughing beside Dad's old truck, his arm around Angela. She'd passed 3 months after him, heart failure, though I always believed she died of grief. I whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm trying." Angela used to say, "Family isn't blood. It's who stays when the world walks out." I couldn't let anyone take them. The next morning, we left the only home the boys had ever known. Caleb cried, "I don't want to leave." "I know, baby," I whispered, crouching down to hug him. "But home is wherever we're together, okay?" We moved into a small basement apartment in South Atlanta. Low ceilings, 1 tiny window, damp walls. Mrs. Rodriguez, the landlord, saw our faces and only asked for half the deposit. "I was orphaned too," she said. Week 1 was chaos. I found 3 jobs: morning shift, cleaning downtown office buildings for $12 an hour. Afternoons, waitress at a greasy spoon called Clover's Grill. Nights and weekends, babysitting for families in Buckhead who didn't ask questions. I watched the boys try to adapt. Eli cooked dinner when I worked late. Noah tried to make everyone laugh. Caleb clung to his bear and stopped sleeping alone. Some nights, I cried on the bathroom floor so they wouldn't hear. One Friday night, the power got shut off. I hadn't paid the bill. I dug up every candle in the apartment and lit the living room like a fairy tale. "We're camping," I told them. "Indoor camping. Who wants ghost stories?" Their eyes lit up. They believed me. But that night when Caleb climbed into my bed and whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" I knew I had no idea. Still, I said, "Yes, we're going to be okay." And I meant it, even if it killed me. I stretched $347 across groceries, school supplies, rent. We made up traditions to replace what we'd lost. Pancake Sundays with whatever toppings we could afford. Story time in the hallway when bedtime felt too heavy. Gratitude dinners, where we each had to say one good thing about our day, even if it was just, I didn't cry. Eli became the cook. Noah handled homework help. Caleb clung to music and his sketchbook. Me, I became everything else. One day, I caught a cold and pushed through 2 shifts anyway. I collapsed during the dinner rush at Clover's. When I woke up in the ER, Mrs. Rodriguez was holding my hand and the boys were in the corner, terrified. "You're exhausted," the doctor said. "You need rest, real rest." "I can't," I whispered. "They need me." Eli stepped forward. "We need you alive." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started a journal. I wrote down everything I remembered. Dad's accounts, things he said, who came by the house after his funeral, every odd thing about how fast we were forced out. Something in my gut told me, this isn't just misfortune. This is deliberate. I had a choice that night. I could let grief, poverty, and fear dictate our lives. Or I could keep a promise I made the night I packed boxes in our old living room, with Caleb curled in my lap and Noah too scared to joke, and Eli trying to hold us all together. "I don't know how, but I will take care of you," I'd said. And I meant it. Every word. "No one survives on $12 an hour," the woman at the shelter said. "But you don't look like someone planning to give up." I wasn't. Not when my brothers were counting on me. I woke up every morning at 5:15, when the sky was still the color of charcoal and the streetlights flickered like they, too, were tired. The apartment always smelled a little like mildew and instant coffee, but I didn't care. I stood barefoot in the kitchen and whispered my war plan to the chipped linoleum. Office cleaning from 6 to 10, waitressing from noon to 5, babysitting from 6 to 10:30. And somewhere in between, groceries, homework checks, budgeting every cent like it was sacred. The boys called it Harper math. I called it survival. On my first morning cleaning offices, I met other women with tired eyes and hidden strength. One of them, Bernice, was 52 and had raised 4 kids by herself. She handed me a pair of gloves and said, "You learn to clean fast and cry quiet. That's how we make it." At Clover's Grill, I wore a stiff uniform and learned to smile through back pain. Mr. Paul, the manager, said I had good hands, quick, steady, careful, and gave me the worst tables because he said I could handle rude customers without flinching. I could. I'd already survived worse. At night, I rang the doorbell to houses I couldn't afford to dream about. Clean white fences, soft carpets, children with full lunch boxes and parents who kissed them on the forehead. I tucked in other people's babies while mine were home alone with Eli cooking boxed mac and cheese. We made it through the first month on instant noodles, donated bread, and pride. Caleb's shoes were too small. Noah's coat had a ripped sleeve. Eli's voice changed overnight, deeper and steadier than I remembered. "Don't worry about us," he said. "You just keep going. We'll take care of each other." But I saw the way he looked at the empty fridge, the way he added water to the last bit of milk to make it stretch. I was failing, and I couldn't afford to. On the 15th of the next month, I was short on rent by $142. I sat outside the apartment building, arms wrapped around my knees, trying not to sob. I had done the math 10 times. No matter how I flipped it, moved it, stretched it, it didn't work. Mrs. Rodriguez came outside with a paper bag and sat beside me on the stoop. "Bean soup," she said, "and you can pay the rest next week." I stared at her. "Why?" She shrugged. "You remind me of my mother. She raised 5 kids in Mexico with less than what you have. You work like someone who has no backup plan. That's how I know I'll get my money eventually. I cried over bean soup that night, not because it was delicious, though it was, but because someone had given me a little grace. Every Sunday, no matter what, I made pancakes. Even if we were down to flour and water, I made them. It became a ritual. Eli whisking the batter, Noah telling awful jokes, Caleb setting the table like it was a 5-star restaurant. We didn't have much, but we had those mornings. "Why pancakes?" Caleb asked one Sunday. "Because they're the only thing I can't mess up," I joked. But the truth was simpler. They reminded me of Dad. He made pancakes every Sunday, even when he was dead tired from night shifts. "Pancakes fix what sleep can't," he used to say. One day at the diner, I overheard a customer talking about legal aid. A young man had just won a custody case against his uncle, thanks to some volunteer lawyer. I nearly dropped a tray. That night, after the boys went to sleep, I looked up every legal assistance clinic within a 100-mile radius. Most didn't return my calls. One told me the case was too old. One asked if I had documentation. I didn't. One woman said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. There's nothing we can do unless you can prove fraud." I hung up and looked around our tiny apartment. 4 toothbrushes in 1 cup. A fridge that hummed too loud. 3 boys asleep in the same room, breathing steady and soft. I didn't need proof to know something had been stolen. But apparently, the courts did. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was cold, that kind of southern winter chill that seeps through thin walls and settles in your bones. Caleb was coughing. I couldn't afford a doctor visit. The heater gave out and I didn't have money for repairs. I called 4 different churches for help. Nothing. So I pulled out every candle we had, dragged all the blankets into the living room, and turned it into a camping site. "Again?" Noah grinned. "We're gonna be expert ghost hunters by spring." Caleb coughed but smiled. "Can I sleep next to you?" "Always," I said, even though I hadn't slept through the night in months. That night, we told stories. Eli read from an old book. Noah did impressions. Caleb sang a little off-key but didn't care. And I knew, in that flickering light, in that freezing room, that this mattered more than warmth. We were still together, still a family. But being together wasn't enough. I needed a plan, not just to survive the month, but to fight back. So I started writing. Everything I remembered. Every odd thing Uncle Dale had said. What Belle had claimed. The timing of the house sale. Dad's safe disappearing. I even started tracking down Dad's old co-workers, calling them during my 10-minute breaks at the diner. I didn't know where it would lead, but I had to believe there was more to the story than he died broke. Dad was too smart, too prepared. He'd once told me, "I don't work this hard for me. I work for what I'll leave behind." He'd meant us. By the end of month 3, I had a binder full of notes, receipts, and unanswered questions. But I also had new strength, because every day I came home, there was laughter. Even in the worst weeks, Noah would say, "You know, if we eat any more noodles, I think I'm going to start speaking pasta." Caleb would draw pictures of superheroes and label one Harper the Great. Eli would quietly take my phone and charge it because he knew I'd forget. We weren't rich, but we were getting stronger. And I was learning. Not all riches are found in bank accounts. Some are found in pancake mornings and candlelight nights and whispered promises kept long after hope should have died. "Your dad didn't just work here," the man said. "He built half this company. Didn't he ever tell you that?" He hadn't. And that was the beginning of everything. I was sitting on the bus after my 3rd shift one night, forehead pressed to the icy glass, trying to stay awake. In my lap was a manila folder filled with notes I'd been gathering. Scribbled memories, receipts, calendar dates, old photos. Most people would have called it nothing. But I'd lived in chaos long enough to know that nothing is often where truth hides. That night, I came across an old document tucked inside one of Dad's books. A folded page from a notebook in his handwriting titled simply, Projected Payout, Ellis Root Optimization Patent. My breath caught. Dad had a patent? I didn't even know what it meant yet, but it wasn't something a man with no assets would leave behind. I circled it in red ink, highlighted it, underlined it twice. This wasn't over. The next day, while the boys were at school and I had 2 hours between jobs, I walked into Ellis Grant Freight Logistics, the company where Dad had worked for over a decade. The receptionist looked at me like I was lost. "I'm Harper Ellis," I said. "Raymond Ellis was my father." She blinked. "Mr. Ellis?" "I'm trying to understand what he did here. He passed away recently." "Oh," she said, softer now. "I'm so sorry. He was really respected here." A pause. "You'll want to talk to Mr. Larson. He was your dad's supervisor." Mr. Larson met me in the break room. Early 50s, white hair, still wore a tie even on casual days. He shook my hand, firm but not patronizing. "Raymond Ellis," he said, almost smiling. "Hardest worker I've ever known. Smart. Didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened." He poured coffee into a chipped mug and offered me one. I declined. "What did he do?" I asked, holding the ledger page. "Really?" Larson looked at the paper, then at me. "Ray didn't just manage routes," he said. "He designed them. Built the software that revolutionized how we operate freight in 3 states. We offered to buy him out a few years ago. He refused." My mouth was dry. "Why?" "Said he wasn't interested in money. He wanted his stake to go to his kids one day." I nearly dropped the folder. "He owned part of this company?" 40%, Larson said quietly. "Didn't anyone ever tell you?" "No." He leaned back, frowning. "That's strange. After he passed, your uncle and some lawyer came by. Said the estate was being closed, signed some paperwork. We cut them a check." My stomach turned. "How much?" He shrugged. "A little under $4 million at the time." I couldn't breathe. I walked out of that building on numb legs, gripping the folder so tightly it crumpled. My father had been a part owner of a multi-million-dollar company, and my uncles had liquidated it behind our backs. They told us we had nothing. That Dad had died broke. Sold the house, took the boys, left me in a basement apartment with nothing but leftover grief and broken promises. But Dad hadn't left us nothing. They'd stolen everything. That night I told Eli first. He sat up in bed, eyes wide. $4 million, he whispered. "That's just from the company. There might be more." "Holy—" "Don't tell the others yet," I said. "Not until I know what we're dealing with." He nodded slowly. "What do we do?" "We find a lawyer. A real one. Someone who doesn't get paid to lie." Easier said than done. I emailed 10 firms, heard back from one. A polite no. I tried a civil rights group. They directed me to legal aid. Legal aid told me to try probate court. Probate court said there was no file under Raymond Ellis's name, which only made me angrier. Then came a name from a woman I met while cleaning an office downtown. Her name was Dee, a secretary for a corporate law firm. She said, "You want someone hungry, someone who's still got something to prove? Try Michelle Park. Just opened her own practice. Young, scrappy, grew up broke like us." I wrote the name down in Sharpie, called the next day. Michelle Park was 29, Korean-American, dressed in all black, and had a voice like silk and steel. I told her everything. Laid out the folder, the ledger, the root patent, the missing will. I told her about the forced eviction, the forged paperwork, the boys being taken, the house being sold. She didn't flinch once. At the end of it, she said simply, "If even half of this is true, we're looking at one of the most disgusting cases of intrafamily fraud I've ever seen. Can you help us?" Her eyes locked with mine. "I'll take the case. Contingency, no win, no fee." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. That night, I gathered the boys and told them everything. Eli already knew most of it, but Noah's mouth fell open. Caleb stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Dad left us millions?" he said quietly. "Yes." "Then why are we here?" I couldn't answer. Noah stood and began pacing. "They stole it. They sold the house, took the company shares, moved on like we didn't exist." "Yes," I said, "but we're not staying silent anymore." Michelle moved fast. She pulled court records, interviewed company staff, tracked property sales and title transfers. Everything led back to a name, Mr. Clayton Banks, the lawyer my uncles brought to the house the day after the funeral. He'd since been disbarred. For fraud. Of course. Michelle found him living 2 hours outside the city, running a used car lot. She drove up alone, came back with a tape recording and a signed affidavit. He admitted to forging documents. He admitted to destroying Dad's will. He admitted to taking $50,000 from Uncle Dale and Aunt Nadine to make it all disappear. But what made me fall into a chair and cry wasn't the confession. It was this. "There was a trust," Banks said. "Big one. Nearly $80 million. Conditions were that all the kids had to reach legal age and the daughter had to be 25. "Where is it now?" Michelle asked. "At the bank. Still active. Still waiting. They don't know the will was destroyed." I stared at the wall that night, not sure if I wanted to scream or throw up. $80 million, and we had been eating boiled noodles in the dark. My father had prepared for everything. He had trusted the system and his family, and they had betrayed him. Betrayed us. Michelle leaned across her desk the next day and said something I'll never forget. "Most people think wealth is about what's in your bank account, but the real wealth is knowing when not to stay quiet. Harper, you're richer than you think, and we're going to make them regret underestimating you." The lawsuit was filed 2 days later. The headline hit the local paper within the week. "Daughter uncovers hidden fortune after family covers up $80 million trust." And just like that, everything started to change. The first call came from the front desk at Clover's Grill. "Harper, there's a news van outside asking for you." I froze with a tray of hash browns in my hand. I thought she was joking, until I looked out the smudged diner window and saw the lens, black, long, cold, like the barrel of a rifle pointed straight at the past I had spent years surviving. "Harper Ellis," someone called. "Can we get a word?" My manager yelled from the kitchen, "If they're not ordering lunch, tell them to leave." I dropped the tray. The lawsuit Michelle filed had gone public overnight. It wasn't supposed to. We had hoped for a few weeks of quiet, time to prepare the boys, time to breathe. But nothing stays quiet when the headline reads, "Siblings defrauded of $80 million by their own family." That number didn't just wake people up. It shook them. Michelle's phone exploded with media inquiries. I had 17 voicemails before noon. My name, once just a tired whisper in a rental office, was now being typed into search bars across the country. The news called me the girl who kept her brothers alive. But no one knew how hard it was to live while doing it. By the time I got home that night, the apartment building was swarming. Reporters camped out in the hallway. A woman from some morning show handed Caleb a cookie and tried to slide him a business card. "Ma'am," Eli said, stepping between them, "you need to leave." I slammed the door behind me and locked it twice. Inside, the boys looked like deer caught in a trap. Alert, panicked, exhausted. "I didn't ask for this," I said. "I know," Noah whispered, "but we're not hiding." Eli nodded. "Good. Then let's speak." The next morning, we held a press conference, not because we wanted attention, but because silence felt like surrender. Michelle stood beside me in a navy suit that meant business and fire at the same time. Her voice, calm and clear, carried through the courthouse steps like a lighthouse in fog. "My client, Harper Ellis, has filed suit on behalf of herself and her 3 minor brothers," she said. "We have evidence that their father's will was destroyed, his estate fraudulently dissolved, and the children left in poverty while relatives enriched themselves with stolen assets." Flashes erupted. Questions poured in. "Harper, is it true your family took everything?" "Yes." "Do you think you can win this?" "I don't think," I replied. "I know." After that, it all moved too fast to track. Every media outlet wanted a piece of the story. Headlines splashed across the internet like wildfire. They were left with ramen. Their family took millions. Daughter discovers hidden inheritance meant for orphaned siblings. They took the boys, the house, the money, but not her fight. And with it came something I didn't expect. Public outrage. Letters, donations, strangers offering their homes, a retired judge who said he remembered my father's ethics, a bakery in Decatur that offered us free bread for life. It was overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to be swept away. There was too much at stake. Then came their calls. First Uncle Dale, then Aunt Nadine, then Belle. They didn't start with apologies. They started with concern. "Let's not make this messy, Harper. There must have been some misunderstanding. We can settle this. You don't want the boys to be dragged through the press." They said everything except the one thing I wanted to hear, the truth. So I didn't answer. I let Michelle speak for me, and her words were steel. The hardest part wasn't the lawsuit. It was watching the boys process it all. Eli was quiet, more than usual. He started journaling, something he'd never done before. Noah stayed up late, watching old family videos, searching for clues, as if in our father's laugh or Angela's warm glance there'd be some secret answer. Caleb cried. Not loudly, just quietly, on the couch, in school, in bed. "This is too big," he told me one night, curled beside me. "I just wanted Dad." "I know, baby," I said. "Me too." A week after the news broke, Michelle called me into her office. She had something. "You're not going to believe this," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside was a scanned letter, signed, notarized, dated 6 months before Dad died. It was addressed to his lawyer, his real lawyer. It stated clearly, "Raymond Ellis leaves full guardianship of his minor children to his eldest daughter, Harper Ellis, in the event of his death." I nearly choked. So why didn't anyone know about this? Michelle tapped the second page. The lawyer, Robert Chan, had passed away in a car accident a week after Dad. His firm shut down. His assistant had misplaced the file. Until now. This is gold, Michelle said. It doesn't just prove your right to guardianship. It confirms that your uncles lied in court. Repeatedly. I couldn't speak. I could only nod. Slowly, fiercely, like my whole body was remembering what it felt like to be believed. But the biggest shock came days later. Michelle stormed into my apartment at 7 p.m., hair windblown, eyes blazing. They found the trust. What? It's still there. At First Southern Bank. Unclaimed. Active. My knees buckled. Eli caught me before I hit the floor. Michelle continued, because the bank never received official notice of death with a valid will, they've just kept it frozen, growing. I stared at her. How much? Her voice cracked just a little. With compound interest? Over $100 million? The boys didn't cheer. They didn't dance. They sat in silence, processing the weight of it. Caleb whispered, "Is that why they took everything from us?" I didn't have to answer. They knew. The next few weeks blurred. There were court filings, a temporary protective order, an emergency request to freeze the uncle's assets, a media frenzy. But through it all, one image burned into my brain. My brothers, huddled around me in a candlelit room, eating pancakes with tears in their eyes and trust in their hearts. They'd never asked for money. They'd only ever asked for me. And no matter what came next, I'd show up for them, again and again, until the world saw not just what we'd lost, but what we never gave up. You think this is about money? I said, standing in the courtroom hallway. Then you've never lost everything and had to keep smiling for 3 hungry boys. My voice didn't shake, not because I wasn't scared, but because I had already lived the worst-case scenario and survived it. We were scheduled for our first mediation hearing on a rainy Tuesday morning. The sky looked bruised and the courthouse steps were slick with mist. Reporters lined the sidewalk, umbrellas like tiny satellites, all orbiting the same question. Would the family face each other for the first time? Yes, we would. And this time, I wouldn't be 19 and voiceless. This time, I had documents, I had witnesses, I had Michelle Park. But more importantly, I had my brothers. We walked in together. Eli in a thrift store suit that somehow made him look like our father. Noah beside him in his best shoes, still cracked but clean. Caleb gripping my hand like he was 7 again. We entered the mediation room, and there they were. Uncle Dale, Aunt Nadine, and Belle. They looked older, tired, like guilt had weathered them faster than time. But not enough. Uncle Dale stood when we entered. "Harper," he said, smiling like we were still playing house. I said nothing. Michelle spoke first. "We will not be addressing anything informal today. If you have settlement offers, put them in writing." Dale frowned. "That's not how families talk." Michelle didn't flinch. "You stopped being family the moment you emptied Raymond Ellis's life into your own pockets." Belle rolled her eyes. She was 19. She had no clue what to do with that kind of money. "That's true," I finally said, my voice calm. "At 19, I didn't know how to manage millions. I only knew how to hold my brothers while they cried." They all looked away. We were offered a settlement. $7 million and a public apology. Michelle passed the paper to me. I didn't even read it. "No." "Harper," Aunt Nadine said softly. We're trying to make this right. No, you're trying to look right. Uncle Dale slammed his hand on the table. We gave you 3 days to move out. We didn't throw you on the street. We gave you time. 3 days. 3 days to erase a childhood. 3 days to pack a life. 3 days between dinner as a family and ramen on the floor of a moldy basement. I looked him in the eye. You gave me nothing. I made a home from nothing. I made boys into men from nothing. And I will not let you buy your way out of what you stole from them. Then we go to court, Belle snapped. Michelle smiled. We're counting on it. That night, we went home to the apartment we still couldn't afford to leave. I wanted to collapse, but the boys had questions. Do you think they'll try to smear us? Noah asked. In the media? They already have, Eli said. They've told everyone we're ungrateful, that Harper's just chasing money. Caleb looked at me. But that's not true, right? I sank to the floor, back against the wall. No, baby. That's never been true. Then what is? I swallowed hard. This isn't about getting rich. It's about proving we were never worthless. That Dad left us something. That he saw us. That we mattered. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. Eli spoke first. Then let's keep going. The next day, Michelle brought me to a storage facility just outside the city. I think I found something, she said. Inside, we met a woman named Pam. She'd worked for Dad's real lawyer, Mr. Chan, before he passed. When she heard our case in the news, she went searching. And she found a box. A cardboard time capsule labeled Ellis, Trust and Legacy. Inside were copies of trust documents, guardianship letters, and one envelope that stopped me cold. It said, to Harper, if something happens to me. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a handwritten letter in Dad's neat script. My Harper, if you're reading this, I didn't get to say goodbye. I'm sorry. I didn't plan to leave so soon, but I planned for everything else. The trust is real. The house is yours. The company's shares are meant for all of you. I left instructions with Mr. Chan, but if they never reach you, I hope you remember what I always said. Ellis, blood, survives. And you, Harper, you're not just surviving, you're leading. That's what your mother saw in you. That's what Angela saw. That's what I see. Take care of the boys. But take care of yourself, too. Love always, Dad. I cried in the car, ugly, shaking sobs, because even in death, my father had done more for me than any living relative. He had seen me. He had trusted me. He had loved me enough to write it down. With the letter added to our case file, Michelle knew we were approaching checkmate, but the other side wasn't going down quietly. That week, Uncle Dale's lawyer filed a motion claiming I was emotionally unstable, unfit to manage money, and dangerous to my brothers. They submitted photos of our basement apartment, a record of one missed rent payment, a blurry screenshot of a tweet Noah once made joking about being poor. It was ridiculous. It was cruel. And it was exactly what I expected. But what they didn't expect was the people willing to speak up for us. Mrs. Rodriguez, our landlord, gave a statement. They were the most respectful tenants I've ever had. That girl worked herself to the bone. If anyone deserves justice, it's them. Mr. Larson from Dad's company testified. Raymond trusted Harper more than anyone. She was the executor of his heart, even if not on paper. And Dee, the secretary who led us to Michelle, said something that made me cry. I watched her scrub office floors, then go home to make pancakes for those boys. She didn't complain. She didn't quit. She carried them through hell, and she did it barefoot. The day the court set the trial date, Michelle took me aside. "I need you to be ready," she said. "I am." "No, Harper. I need you to be really ready. They're going to come after your integrity, your parenting, your pain. They will try to make you feel small again." I looked her dead in the eyes. They already did that, and I'm still standing. At home that night, Caleb slipped a folded piece of paper under my door. It was a drawing, stick figures, me, Eli, Noah, Caleb, standing on a tall mountain. Above it, in bold crayon letters, "We never asked for money. We asked for each other." And somehow, that felt like winning already. "Objection sustained," the judge said, but not before the whole room heard Uncle Dale yell, "She was just a kid. What would she have done with all that money anyway?" Silence followed. Not the kind that comes from uncertainty, but the kind that sharpens the air. Like everyone's breath got caught at once. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, in a borrowed blazer, with hands folded, and truth sitting quietly in my chest like a burning coal. The jury watched me, and I let them. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. You think justice would need grand halls and echoing walls, but it smelled like old carpet and coffee, and the jury box creaked when people shifted in their seats. On the first day of the trial, Michelle stood beside me like a lighthouse, radiating calm and control. Her notes were color-coded, her eyes sharp. "You okay?" she asked under her breath. "I've already lived through worse," I said. She nodded. "Then let's show them." Opening statements started with thunder. The defense painted me as an unstable, overreaching young woman who'd stirred up chaos for attention and fortune. "She was 19, Your Honor," the lawyer said, addressing the jury. "She had no income, no degree, and no legal training. And yet she believed she was entitled to manage a multi-million-dollar estate." He smiled thinly. "And when her father tragically passed, she lost not just a parent, but her grasp on reality. What followed were years of confusion, resentment, and now, retaliation." Some jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman narrowed her eyes. I waited. Then it was Michelle's turn. She didn't pace. She didn't gesture dramatically. She simply placed a photo of me and the boys on the display screen, one we'd taken at the old house before Dad died. Eli was holding a wrench, Noah covered in flour, Caleb with his arms around my neck. "This isn't a story about money," she said. "It's a story about a girl who became a mother overnight, and was punished for it." And then Michelle did something that made the courtroom still. She stepped away from the podium, walked to the jury, and lowered her voice. She didn't take from anyone, but they took everything from her. Our side called witnesses first. Mr. Larson, Dad's former supervisor, testified that Dad had co-founded Ellis Grant Logistics and that his 40% stake had been quietly transferred weeks after his death by Uncle Dale. When asked if Dad ever discussed Harper, Mr. Larson's voice cracked. He said she was his compass, said she knew how to lead without pretending she had all the answers. That kind of person should run a company someday. Then came Pam, the assistant who had found the box of documents in storage. She brought copies of Dad's trust, guardianship papers, and the sealed letter addressed to me. She spoke gently. "I remember Mr. Ellis. He said, 'If anything happens to me, my girl Harper will know what to do.'" The defense looked uncomfortable, but they still fought hard. They brought up the fact that I had dropped out of school, that I'd missed rent, that I once sold a ring my dad had given me to pay for Caleb's asthma medication. They tried to make those moments look like failure, but Michelle made sure they looked like sacrifice. Ms. Ellis, the defense attorney asked during cross-examination, can you explain why you thought it was appropriate to raise 3 minors in a basement apartment without reliable heat? Because I didn't have a choice, I replied evenly. And because I knew love could keep us warm even when the heater couldn't. The jury watched. Closely. Every time Caleb flinched. Every time Eli's jaw tightened. Every time I steadied my hands to hide how much they shook. And then came the moment Michelle had prepared for all week. She called Mr. Clayton Banks, the disbarred lawyer who had helped destroy my father's will. He walked in slowly, pale, hunched, eyes sunken under the weight of years and guilt. Do you recognize this document? Michelle asked, holding up the forged copy. He nodded. Did you create it? Yes. Were you paid to do so? Yes. By whom? He hesitated. Speak, Mr. Banks, the judge said. Dale Ellis and Nadine Ellis. The air left the room, but the most powerful moments came when my brothers testified. Eli went first. He stood tall in his too-tight suit and spoke with the calm of someone who had been old since he was 15. My sister didn't just raise us. She taught us what it meant to survive with dignity. I watched her go to work sick. I watched her eat less so we could eat more. I watched her break down in silence just to keep us whole. Then Noah. He made the jury laugh with stories about Harper math and pancake Sundays, but his voice cracked when he talked about watching me collapse from exhaustion. She gave up her future for us, he said. This case isn't about what was stolen from her. It's about what was stolen from all of us. Then Caleb. He clutched the microphone with trembling hands. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Nights I cried. But every morning Harper was there. She was always there, even when she had nothing. And then he pulled a crumpled drawing from his pocket, the same one he had slipped under my door. The judge let him display it. 4 stick figures on a mountaintop. The words, "We never asked for money. We asked for each other." Half the courtroom cried. So did I. The defense had little left. They tried to discredit Michelle. Failed. They tried to attack our character. Failed. And when they put Uncle Dale on the stand, hoping for redemption, he exploded under pressure. She was just a teenager, he shouted. She wouldn't have known what to do with millions. Michelle approached slowly. Mr. Ellis, what did you do with the money? Silence. Did you use it to care for the boys? More silence. Or did you buy a second home in Charleston? A new car? A vacation to Dubai? He opened his mouth, closed it. The jury had heard enough. In her closing argument, Michelle didn't raise her voice. She simply said, being poor didn't make Harper unfit. Being young didn't make her incapable. Love made her stronger than any paper trail could have. And the law, when it is just, should recognize that. And then she pointed to me. To survive betrayal, poverty, and grief, and still choose kindness, still raise 3 children with honor, that's not immaturity. That's heroism. The courtroom was silent as the jury left to deliberate. We waited. 1 hour, then 2, 3. I tried not to look at the clock, tried not to let the weight of a decade rest on my shoulders. Then the door opened, and the foreperson stood. In the matter of Ellis v. Ellis, she said, voice clear, we find for the plaintiff on all counts. Gasps, tears, Cheers. I didn't move. Until Caleb grabbed my hand and whispered, "We won." Only then did I let myself cry. The judge awarded the release of the entire trust. But he didn't stop there. He added punitive damages, pain and suffering, legal fees. He addressed the defendants directly. You didn't just steal money. You stole futures, and no courtroom can fully repair what you broke. But today, this court acknowledges who was right all along. He turned to me. "Ms. Ellis, you kept your family together when the world tried to tear it apart. And that, in the eyes of this court, is the greatest legacy your father could have left." "What does it feel like?" the reporter asked, voice gentle. "To go from ramen to millions?" I smiled, the kind that hurts a little before it softens. "Honestly," I said, "ramen still tastes like home." And it did. Even now. The trial had ended, but something in us still hadn't settled. We won the case. We had the documents, the verdict, the public support, the financial security we'd never known. But I still found myself waking at 4 a.m., wondering if the electricity would be shut off. Still checked my bank account twice a day. Still flinched when I saw an envelope with a legal seal. Because you don't just unlearn survival, even when you're safe. The bank released the trust within weeks. It had grown, more than even Michelle predicted. After years of compound interest, investment rollovers, and careful holding, the final amount transferred to the Ellis family account was $127.4 million. The banker, a man named Mr. Lindell, looked nervous when he said it aloud, as if he expected us to jump on the table or faint. We didn't. We just sat there. Quiet. "Do you want to transfer to an investment fund?" he asked, "or divide among yourselves?" I looked at Eli. He nodded, then at Noah, who gave a quiet thumbs up. Caleb just whispered, "Only if we do it together." We did. The first thing I bought was a house, not a mansion, not a gated castle with a circular driveway and cold marble floors. Just a 4-bedroom house in a quiet part of Atlanta, with warm wooden walls and a garden in the back. A real kitchen, a fireplace, a window in every room. When we moved in, the first thing I did was cook pancakes. Same recipe, same cast iron pan. The boys called it Home 2.0, but money couldn't fix everything. For weeks, we couldn't stop hoarding food. Eli still folded his clothes like they needed to fit into a duffel bag. Caleb kept whispering, "Are we allowed to touch this?" whenever he walked into a store. And me? I still didn't sleep unless all the lights were off and the door was locked twice. We weren't broken, but we were changed. One night, I sat with Michelle at the kitchen table. We were looking at options, nonprofits, investments, foundations. She sipped tea while I picked at my cuticles, a nervous habit I hadn't kicked. "You've got more than money now," she said. "You've got a platform. What do you want to build with it?" I thought for a long time. Then I pulled out an old spiral notebook, the one I used to write grocery lists and pay schedules and bedtime stories when we lived in the basement apartment. I turned to a blank page and wrote 2 words: Promise House. Promise House became our dream. A nonprofit built to help families like ours, siblings raising siblings, young caregivers overlooked by the system, teens forced to grow up too soon. We designed it as a home, not an institution. Beds, real food, legal support, therapy, pancake mornings, our family's rituals, reimagined for those still in the storm. Eli took the lead on operations. He was methodical, kind, good with structure. Noah handled media and outreach. His humor and warmth made people listen. Caleb, now 17, became the voice of the youth committee. He knew exactly what kids needed, because he still remembered needing it. And me? I became the mentor I once wished I had. Our story spread, beyond Georgia, beyond the headlines. We were invited to speak at conferences, to sit on panels, to meet governors and legislators. Some people still raised eyebrows. What do these kids know about policy? But when Caleb stood before a room full of politicians and said, "The system's not broken. It's just not built for people like us," the room fell silent, and they listened. We met families like ours across the country. A 16-year-old girl raising her 2 brothers in Indiana. A boy in Arizona who lost his parents and hid it from the school system so he wouldn't be separated from his sisters. A college student in Detroit sleeping in her car with her disabled cousin because no shelter would take them both. We saw their eyes, heard their stories, and we knew. We weren't the only ones. We were just the ones lucky enough to be heard. But healing isn't just in headlines, it's in the small moments. Like the night I found Eli on the back porch, staring at the stars. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" he asked. I sat beside him. He'd be speechless. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," he admitted. "Me too," I said. "But I think maybe this is what it feels like to start over." He smiled. "I don't hate them anymore," he added. "Dale, Nadine, all of them. I just don't think about them." That, I realized, was the most powerful freedom of all. Months later, I got a letter, not from a lawyer, not from the bank, but from Belle. It was handwritten, neat, too neat, the kind of handwriting you use when you're afraid of being misunderstood. "Harper, you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. But I needed to say it out loud. I was wrong. Not just in what I said, but in what I believed. I thought you were weak for clinging to those boys. I thought letting go meant growing up. I was wrong. I hope someday you can forgive me, or at least not hate me. You did what I couldn't do. You stayed. Belle." I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not because I forgave her, but because I didn't need to carry the weight anymore. Our lives didn't become perfect. Eli dated someone for a year. It ended quietly. Noah got overwhelmed with press attention and took a break from media. Caleb battled depression for a season, unsure of how to process life beyond survival. But we had each other. Always. And that made all the difference. One Sunday morning, exactly a year after the trial ended, I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while the house slowly woke up. I heard Caleb's voice from the living room. "Do you think she'll ever rest?" Noah laughed. "She doesn't know how." Eli said something that made me tear up, even from behind the pan. "She doesn't need to rest. She just needs to know she's not alone anymore." And for the first time in years, I believed that. Not because we had money, but because we had love. Because when the storm came, we didn't scatter. We gathered. We held the line. And when the world said we couldn't, we looked at each other and said, "We already did." "There's one more thing," Mr. Lindell said, holding a small, weathered box. "Your father asked for this to be released only if the trust was ever claimed by his children." It wasn't on any inventory list, not in any court record. Just a box, no larger than a shoebox, with our last name carved gently on the lid in Dad's handwriting. Ellis. I felt something ancient rise in my chest. Grief, wonder, fear, and something else. Like Dad had reached across time to speak one more time. We were in Mr. Lindell's office, tucked on the 16th floor of First Southern Bank, surrounded by frosted glass and polished wood. It was supposed to be a routine meeting to sign the final paperwork on the trust fund division. But when he placed the box between us and slid it forward with reverence, everything changed. "I almost forgot this existed," he admitted. "Your father set it aside with a notarized instruction. Only open if they find their way. I didn't know what he meant until now." The room went quiet. I opened the lid with shaking hands. Inside, 4 letters. One for me, one for Eli, one for Noah, one for Caleb. Each with our names in Dad's blocky print. I reached for mine last. That night we sat around the fireplace in the new house. No media, no lawyers, no noise. Just us. Eli read his first. To Eli, "You were always the quiet one. But I saw you. Every thoughtful glance, every time you helped without being asked. When I imagined what kind of man I wanted to raise, it was always you. I didn't leave you money. I left you trust. You've always known what to do with it. Lead with wisdom. Lead without shouting. And don't be afraid to cry when the world forgets it's okay to feel. That's what makes you different. And strong." Eli didn't speak for a long time. He just folded the letter, pressed it to his chest, and nodded. Noah went next. To Noah, "You lit up every room you walked into. You reminded me to laugh when the weight of the world felt like too much. If you ever find yourself drowning in sorrow, son, reach for joy like a lifeline. Use your voice, tell the stories, make them laugh, and then make them care. You were born with a gift. Just make sure you use it to lift others, not just yourself. And never forget where your light came from." Noah laughed softly, then wiped a tear away. "Damn," he whispered. He really knew me. We all looked at Caleb. He hesitated. "Can I read mine last?" he asked. I nodded and opened mine. To Harper, my girl, my compass, my strength. There are no words for what I owe you. But I'll try. I saw the future in you when you were 9 years old and told your stepmother to sit down while you made dinner. You had fire, but you also had mercy. And that combination, it's rare. If you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I'm sorry for that. I wanted to spare you from shouldering everything, but if you had to, and I believe you did, I know you carried it with grace. You've given more than I ever expected of you, more than life ever should have demanded. You were never supposed to raise them, but if anyone could, it was you. And Harper, don't forget to live your life too. Don't just survive. You were born to lead, but also to love, to dance, to be held. Let yourself be held. You deserve it. I love you. Dad. I didn't cry right away. I held it together. Through the last line, through folding the letter, through placing it back in the box. But when Caleb spoke, I broke. He opened his envelope slowly. Inside wasn't just a letter. It was a drawing. A stick figure boy with wide arms, standing beneath a sun that took up half the sky. Underneath it, in Dad's handwriting, "To my littlest light, keep shining." And then the letter. To Caleb. You were always my heart. You reminded me why I worked so hard, so you'd never have to understand pain too early. If you're reading this, then you did. And I'm sorry. But I know you. I know your gentleness is not weakness. It is the mark of a giant. Be kind in a world that will try to make you hard. Sing when they tell you to be quiet. And when your voice shakes, sing anyway. They'll need your softness someday. And when they do, don't hide. Be exactly who you are. That's all I ever wanted. Love, always. Dad. Caleb folded the drawing, pressed it to his lips, and said, he knew. We all knew what he meant. That night, I lay in bed, the letter on my nightstand, and listened to the silence of a house that was finally ours. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be the protector. I felt protected, seen, not just by the brothers I raised, but by the Father who never stopped loving us, even in his absence. The next morning, I made pancakes. Same recipe, same pan, same 3 boys, now men, dragging themselves to the table like they were still in high school. Except this time, there were smiles, jokes, and lightness I hadn't seen in years. Still tastes like hope, Noah said, mouthful. Still tastes like survival, Eli added. Still tastes like Dad, Caleb whispered. We all nodded. Later that week, we had a frame made for the letters and hung them in the hallway outside the kitchen, not for decoration, but as compass points, reminders of where we'd come from and why we could never lose our way again. The letters didn't bring closure, they brought continuation. Like Dad was still writing our story with us, and that made all the difference. We're not building a mansion, I said. We're building a table big enough so no one ever eats alone again. It started as a joke. One night, while the boys argued over who made the best pancakes, I said, you know, if this keeps up, we're going to need a bigger table. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Like, how big? I shrugged. Big enough for everyone. Eli smiled. Define everyone. And that's how it began. Not with a business plan or blueprints, just a need. Deeply human, deeply simple, to make room for people who once had none. The Ellis Family Home Foundation opened its doors on the 2nd anniversary of the trial. We called it the House with 20 Chairs, because that's exactly what it had. A giant custom-built oak table in the dining hall with 20 mismatched chairs, each one engraved with the name of someone who helped build our new life. Chair 1, Raymond Ellis. Chair 2, Angela Ellis. Chairs 3 to 6, Harper, Eli, Noah, Caleb. Chair 7, Mrs. Rodriguez. Chair 8, Michelle Park. Chair 9, Pam, the assistant who found the trust box. Chair 10, Mr. Larson. Chairs 11-20, for those we hadn't met yet. The kids still out there. The survivors. The siblings still holding it all together with duct tape and dreams. It wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. We built it in the heart of Atlanta, not far from where we grew up, on land bought from the same developer who had once snatched our old house. Poetic justice. It had 5 bedrooms upstairs, each one dedicated to emergency housing for youth-led households. The downstairs had a legal resource center, a therapy room, and a kitchen large enough for 5 people to cook at once without bumping elbows. And of course, the dining room, where every Sunday we served pancakes to anyone who needed them. The first Sunday we opened, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. 50 people lined up outside before 9 a.m. Some came alone, some with siblings, some just curious, some clearly hurting. We fed them all. No IDs, no forms, no questions, just warmth, syrup, butter, real plates. Noah wore an apron and cracked jokes while pouring orange juice. Caleb played music through the speakers and taught kids how to make banana pancakes. Eli stood by the door greeting everyone like they were already family. And me? I flipped pancakes, because some traditions are too sacred to stop. That afternoon, I sat on the porch swing out back, watching the last guest walk away, a plate of leftovers wrapped in foil. Michelle sat beside me. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I said. "We did." She smiled. "You know, a lot of people would have just taken the money and disappeared. Bought some beach house in Maui." I laughed. "You think I don't dream of Maui?" She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You could have escaped. But instead, you built the thing that never existed for you." I looked out across the garden, where kids were still playing, and whispered, "That's the point, isn't it?" Later that night, Eli found me in the hallway. He had something behind his back. "What's that?" I asked. "Another chair," he said. He placed it in the corner near the framed letters from Dad. This one wasn't engraved, just painted, with bright yellow, blue, and white spirals. "Who's it for?" Eli smiled. "For the girl who carried 4 lives on her back, and still set a place for others." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it made me proud, but because it reminded me how far we'd come. From folding chairs in a basement to 20 carved names and room for more. One day, a young girl named Janelle showed up at the house. 13 years old. Backpack too heavy for her frame. Shoes 2 sizes too big. She didn't say much, but she kept glancing at the hallway where our names were etched on the wall. Finally, she asked, "Do you think I could have a chair, too?" I knelt down beside her. "You don't have to earn it," I said. "It's already waiting." Every name added to the wall told a story. A 15-year-old who'd been raising her autistic brother since their parents were deported. A 17-year-old boy who worked nights to keep the lights on while his twin studied. A 20-year-old who dropped out of college to raise her cousin's newborn. All of them, holding their world together, invisibly, just like we once had. We started a mentorship program. I taught budgeting and court navigation and how to apply for housing assistance. But mostly, I listened. Because no one had listened to me when I was 19 and terrified. Now I gave them what I wished I'd had. And it wasn't answers. And it wasn't answers. It was presence. The press came back, of course. Documentaries, interview requests, even a movie deal. We turned most of it down. This wasn't a story to sell. It was a life to protect. But once in a while we said yes. Not for fame, but so someone out there, sitting in a broken-down apartment with 3 younger siblings and no idea what comes next, could hear the words, "You are not alone." One quiet Friday, Caleb walked into the kitchen while I was flipping pancakes for a small group of new arrivals. He held up his phone. "There's someone who wants to talk to you." I wiped my hands and took the call. A woman's voice came through. "Harper? It's Belle." I froze. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "I just wanted to say, I visited the house, quietly, last Sunday. I saw the chairs, the wall. I didn't speak to anyone. Just watched." Silence. "I don't deserve one," she added. "No," I said gently. "But if your daughter ever needs one, we'll make sure it's there." A pause. Then she said something I never expected. "I think my father would have been proud of you." After I hung up, Caleb handed me a folded paper. It was a drawing, just like the one he'd made as a child. 4 figures this time, then 5, then more, all standing around a giant table. Underneath, in block letters, "No one eats alone here." I placed it beside Dad's letter on the wall, and when the guests arrived that Sunday, I pointed to it and said, "That's the only rule here. You don't have to be okay. You just have to sit." "You can stop running now," I whispered to the girl. "You made it. You're safe." It was raining the night she came, not a storm, just that quiet kind of southern rain that softens the sky, like the world is finally tired of being hard. I was in the kitchen, cutting strawberries, when the bell rang. Eli answered. He didn't call for me, didn't say anything at all. He just opened the door and let her walk in. She couldn't have been more than 11. Skinny, soaking wet, shoes worn flat. Her left hand gripped a trash bag filled with clothes. Her right, clutching the hand of a toddler, a boy, maybe 2 years old, eyes wide and silent like he'd already seen too much. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Eli crouched, met her eyes, and said, "Would you like pancakes?" Her shoulders dropped. Not much, just enough to mean she wouldn't run. He led them inside. By the time I reached the front room, Michelle was already wrapping the girl in a towel. Caleb held the baby like he'd done it 1,000 times. Noah was heating the griddle. I knelt beside her. "Hi," I said. She stared. Not afraid. Not hostile. Just empty. Like someone who hadn't had the chance to be a kid in a very long time. "My name's Harper," I added. "I run this place. You don't have to tell me anything. You don't have to sign anything. But if you want to stay, you can." Her voice was paper thin. "We don't have nowhere else. You do now." Later that night, I found her sitting in the hallway near the framed letters, the ones Dad left us. She traced her fingers along my name. "Did your dad write these?" she asked. I nodded. "He died?" "Yeah," I said. "But he left us something to hold on to." She looked back at the wall. "Mine left too. But he didn't leave nothing." I paused, then sat beside her. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Marley." "Do you want to pick a chair?" She blinked. "What?" I pointed toward the dining hall. "We have a tradition, 20 chairs. Each one carries a story. If you want one, we'll carve your name in." Her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in any of the kids who passed through. Not hope, not gratitude. It was awe. Like someone had just offered her a seat in the world. We carved her name into chair 15, and her brother's into chair 16. She chose the design. A sunflower for hers, a tiny truck for his. The next morning, she helped Noah pour syrup for the younger kids. She held her brother while I led a workshop on emergency guardianship. At lunch, she sat at the far end of the table, smiled softly, and said grace under her breath. No one asked her to. No one corrected her. She just was. And it was enough. That night, I stood outside the kitchen, watching the light spill across her face as she hummed quietly to her brother, rocking him in her lap. And I realized something. She wasn't just here to be saved. She was going to grow up and save others, like I had, like we all had. She was part of the legacy now. Not because she earned it, but because she survived long enough to be seen. Years passed. The table grew scratches and stories. Chairs were added, names carved. Kids came and left and came back again. As volunteers, as counselors, as mentors. Caleb taught art therapy in the chapel twice a week. Eli ran logistics, funding, partnerships, repairs. Noah became our outreach director, traveling state to state with a single mission: find the ones holding it all together in silence and bring them home. And me? I stayed in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. Because that's where this all started. And I never wanted to forget. One spring morning, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Just a note. You gave me a chair. Now I build tables. Love, Marley. Inside was a photo. A small brick center in Jackson, Mississippi. Above the door, in paint so bold it made my breath catch. The house with 15 chairs. Underneath? Founded by survivors. For survivors. No one eats alone. I pressed the photo to my heart. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood the full shape of the promise I made when I was 19, holding 3 boys in a house with no power and no future. It wasn't just, I'll protect you. It was, this ends with us. At Dad's gravesite, years later, we all returned. The 4 of us. Older now, wiser. Scarred and soft and strong. We laid a single sunflower down. And Caleb whispered, "We kept it going, Dad. Just like you asked." I stepped forward and with a smile said, "You were the first chair. We just kept adding wood." And when I turned to leave, I could almost hear his voice in the breeze. "Good work, kid. Now pass it on." This story was never just about pancakes, or custody battles, or trust funds, or even survival. It was about what happens when someone refuses to let pain have the final word. Harper wasn't a superhero. She was a sister. A girl who had every reason to give up, but instead, she got up. Again and again, until the world changed shape around her persistence. If you've ever had to hold a family together with shaking hands, if you've ever made dinner out of nothing but silence and willpower, if you've ever felt invisible while carrying the weight of everyone else's future, then this story was always about you. You matter. Your story matters. And maybe, just maybe, there's a chair out there with your name on it. So keep building tables, keep passing the plate, keep showing up, even if your voice shakes and your past is heavy, because someone out there is still walking through the rain. And you might just be the light on their porch, with love for the brave, the tired, and the ones who never stop loving. The author.